Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm Franco, and I'm here to recommend you guys a book that I think is a must read for all of you, especially because, my audience I started off talking about politics and stuff that's happening in the world. You guys are really invested in this stuff. You guys are really invested in looking at how liberals think this way, conservatives think this way. Well, this book right here gives you an evolutionary perspective and a psychological perspective for why they have these beliefs. This is called The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And it's written by Jonathan Haidt, or Jonathan Haidt. I can't remember how it's pronounced. Jonathan Haidt or Haidt. And he is a moral psychologist. And it brings together biology, like evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, anthropology, and it explains why we're so divided. We have these different moral values, but there's an evolutionary reason for why we have those values. So if you want to open your mind and understand why people think the way that they do about politics, and yeah, propaganda has to do with it. U.S. media or whatever media it is that they're watching, that definitely has to do with it. But why do they believe the things that the propaganda or the media or the information they come across, why do they believe that? I came across this cartoon that explains the book, and I'm going to play a bit of it, and then I'm going to analyze some of the stuff that's being played here. I thought it was a really good illustration of what the book is trying to explain on why we're so divided. So I recommend checking out this channel right here and looking at this video. It's called Nonfiction Takeaway. So let's look here, and then I'm gonna pause it and explain some of the stuff that they're saying here.
This is Nonfiction Takeaway from The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. The book is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, Haidt talks about how intuitions come first and strategic reasoning second in our moral thinking. In part 2, he talks about how there's more to morality than harm and fairness. In part 3, he talks about how morality binds and blinds us. The central metaphor of part 1 is that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant. The job of the rider, our conscious or rational mind, is to serve the elephant. The job of the elephant, our subconscious, is to govern most of our behavior. Right?
All right, so we have our subconscious mind. It's wired a certain way, and it's been wired that way because of the way we've been naturally selected, the way we've evolved. So it's wired a certain way to help us survive. We have the moral beliefs that we have, the moral values that we have, because it's helped our ancestors survive in the past. So as the video explained, the elephant is representing the subconscious mind, and then the man that's riding the elephant, that's the conscious mind. Our conscious mind is serving our subconscious mind. The key is to be aware of the subconscious mind. To not let that subconscious mind drive you, but you be the one that's driving that, it's in control of that, that's aware of yourself. So yeah, let's go on.
Where our morality comes from, and concludes that it's both innate and learned, and it varies somewhat by culture. Haidt is not, however, the type of relativist who will say that all moralities are equally good. One important point of part 1 is that intuitions come first, and strategic reasoning second. According to Haidt, our moral thinking is more like a politician searching for votes than a scientist searching for truth.
Right, so what he means by that, the way that we're thinking, the way that we're driven by our morality is more like a politician that's looking for votes than the scientist that's looking for answers. That means that we're often searching for confirmation bias. Like, we have a gut feeling that something is wrong, and so we try to look for answers to justify our initial thoughts. rather than just looking at it completely objectively, like a scientist would. But obviously some scientists, they're humans, and sometimes they're driven also by confirmation bias.
We care much more about what others think of us than about the truth.
Oh, my bad, there's an echo. All right, let me turn that down. Was it a really bad echo?
Most of the time, the writer simply tries to justify the opinions of the elephant. That is, the opinions we already hold, instead of finding out about the truth. In moral and political matters, we are groupish rather than selfish, meaning that we use reason to support our team or the interests of the group.
All right, so in politics and morality, I support my team. We as humans, we needed a group in order to survive. We're social creatures. Like we lived in communities. That is how humans survive. We see this when in our closely in some biologically close relatives of ours, like some chimps or some other primate species like monkeys. Like, they are social creatures. They live in communities, and they often need each other in order to survive. And we also need each other in order to survive. We divide our roles. No one person can do everything and then survive. At least not in like the society that we've built for ourselves.
Most action in moral psychology is in the intuitions. The central metaphor of part 2 is that the righteous mind is like a tongue with 6 taste receptors. They are care, fairness, loyalty, authority, sanctity.
All right, so each of these different tastes have evolved for a reason. So care, that evolved because we needed to take care of our young. Like, we needed to take care of our babies. We have to ensure that our genes, our alleles, are going to pass on to future generations. And that's why not just us, but other animals also do this, and they take care of their young. So there's a moral value in that. We care for the people who are vulnerable, or the people who are suffering. Fairness, this is to make sure that we are not being exploited by other people, right? Because that won't be good for our survival if we get exploited, and then they're the ones that benefit off of that. That won't ensure that our genes get passed on to future generations. Loyalty, since we are social creatures, we live in groups, we have to make sure that there's like a respect for each other. We have to make sure that we are being altruistic. So that's why this loyalty evolved here. Being loyal to your group. Authority, so throughout evolutionary history, there's been there's diversity within groups. There's going to be some individuals that are going to be more leader-like than other individuals, or some individuals that have certain traits that make them better than other people with certain tasks. So that's why whenever someone is better than us at something, I don't know, back when we were hunters and gatherers, maybe there was someone that was like the lead hunter, or someone who was like the lead gatherer, or someone who was good at communicating with other tribes. We entrusted them to do their role, to talk to the other tribe, or to give good instructions on how to hunt down an animal. So there's that. We evolved that respect for some of the leaders that we had in our hunter and gathering societies. And then sanctity, that evolved because we wanted, since we're omnivores, we wanted to make sure we're avoiding poisons from some of the plants that we're eating, or some of the bacteria or rotting foods that we're going to eat. So we have to be, we had to have this instinct to be repelled by those things, repelled by things that could cause harm to us and make us sick. And also, like, if we see that, someone of the opposite sex, like if they look like they're unhealthy, or like if they may have like an STD, that might not be good for the individual's survival. So that's why they evolved that, because they want to avoid themselves from getting sick and then dying. All right, let's go.
And Haidt adds a sixth module, liberty.
Yeah. So they briefly mentioned that, but liberty, that was like the sixth moral value that Jonathan Haidt added in his book, and this evolved because we wanted to make sure we're not being dominated by other individuals, and that we can do the things that we want to do rather than doing the things that the person who's more dominant wants us to do.
Liberty.
The Care Foundation evolved because we have to care for vulnerable children or offspring. Fairness evolved to avoid exploitation and reap the rewards of cooperation. Loyalty evolved to help us identify people that are not team players. Authority evolved to help us navigate social hierarchies. Sanctity evolved in response to the omnivore's dilemma. It helps us avoid pathogens and parasites. To improve the moral foundations theory, Haidt and colleagues added the Liberty Foundation, that evolved to make people notice and resent signs of attempted domination. And they modified the Fairness Foundation to focus more on proportion.
All right, so in the book, Jonathan Haidt mentions, and then he backs this up by some psychological studies and some of these other, even like some biological studies. Liberals tend to value care and fairness more than the other moral values that are here, while conservatives tend to value more so all of these almost equally. And then because of that, that's why a lot of conservatives are more effective with their messaging when they have like their political ads and stuff, because they're using all of these different moral values, like sanctity, like when they talk about, I don't know, we have to support, we have to, I don't know, when they talk about like religious views and purity of the family or of women. What else? Authority, like they use like symbolism of the flag, and like, I respect this country, I respect this flag, I love this country. Like that's why they're so effective with their messaging, because they can use all of these different moral values. Whereas liberals, which Democrats tend to cater to, they're mainly focusing on the care and fairness aspect, talking about social justice issues.
When it comes to moral psychology, Haidt notes that weird societies, that is, Western, educated, industrial, rich, and democratic societies, are different from other societies. They see the world as full of separate objects rather than relationships. That is, moral concerns are here limited to concerns about individuals harming other individuals. Our morality binds us together in groups and blinds us to the existence and coherence of other groups. This is part of the reason why good people are divided by politics and religion. The central metaphor of the book's third part is that human beings are 90% chimp and 10%
Yeah.
Human beings are mainly...
So this is how humans are at conflict, since Jonathan Haidt brings up this analogy of how humans are 90% chimp and 10% bee. 10% meaning that that 10% of bees are like super organisms, really, like, because they're not individualistic beings. They're doing everything that's for the good of the hive, that's going to benefit the queen, who's the one that's giving rise to the next generation, rather than each individual having that opportunity to pass on their genes. No, it's only the queen that's doing that. So all the other worker bees are just doing what's best for the hive. But humans are only 10% of that, since we're still social creatures and we needed each other in order to survive. But at the same time, we're also individualistic and selfish, since we all have that equal opportunity to pass on our genes to the next generation. Equal opportunity meaning that we all have the ability to reproduce. Not all bees have the opportunity to reproduce, only the queen does, and some of the males. depending on the species of the bee. But of course, some males and females, biological male and female humans, had certain traits that helped them pass on their genes better, to help them survive long enough to reproduce more than the other individuals that may be lacking in some way. Maybe they're not as fast, or maybe they weren't as good of hunters, or maybe they were more susceptible to diseases or being infected by parasites. Whereas some other humans may have had some kind of immunity, things like that.
Natural selection working at the level of the individual. But, according to Haidt, we also have a few group-related adaptations. We are conditional hive creatures. We can transcend self-interest and lose ourselves when we become part of the whole. We need access to healthy hives in order to flourish. In other words, Haidt argues that human nature was produced by natural selection working at two levels simultaneously: the individual level as well as the group level. This is controversial because it's difficult to see how group selection could evolve given the advantage of protecting the self and one's kin. So why are good people divided?
Yeah, so we're at a conflict sometimes, because sometimes what the group wants may go against the interests of what the individual wants, and that's like an argument that was being used a lot during the whole COVID narrative and the COVID situation that was happening in 2020 and 2021, where they're like, oh, you have to get jabbed because it's for the good of everyone. And other people were saying, well, we should respect what the individual wants. Maybe they don't want to get jabbed because of such and such reason, or we've discussed this ad nauseum, especially on the Rockfin channel. And that's why I say informing yourself and coming down to the facts will help clear up what is the best decision when it comes to things like that. Like getting jabbed may be harmful at the end of the day, because look at all these findings and things like that.
Okay. So why are good people divided by politics and religion? Well, in part because our minds were designed for groupish righteousness. We subscribe to moral foundations to varying degrees. We have different moral taste receptors, so to speak. The most sacred moral value for liberals is care, and to a lesser extent, fairness and liberty. They may go so far as to reject sanctity, loyalty, and authority as moral values at all. The most sacred value for libertarians, unsurprisingly, is individual liberty, and to some extent fairness. Other moral values play a minor role for libertarians. The most sacred value for social conservatives is to preserve the institutions and traditions that sustain a moral community. As the only group, they tend to focus on all 6 taste receptors in their moral thinking. So how do we get around our differences? Well, Haidt suggests that liberal, libertarian, and conservative viewpoints are all needed to create balance in the world. If you want to change people's minds, you've got to talk to their elephants. You have to step outside.
Yeah, so what he means by that, you got to understand their elephants, you got to understand their subconscious, you got to understand why is it that they have these moral values. So I think it's a really good book that'll help us all understand each other better. Like, we don't have to agree, but at the very least we can come to an understanding of why that person believes what they believe in. And if we're all doing that, that can help clear up our mind, and then look at what do the facts say, what do we know is actually true, and what is it that's driving me to just make me feel a certain way, if that makes sense. Like, the book helps you see that your beliefs are not as real as you think they are. A lot of them are driven by confirmation biases that make you feel comfortable about your assumptions that you've identified with. So the more you understand that, the more that you can catch that, I'm just assuming this because this is making me feel comfortable. So yeah, highly recommend this. Again, The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Stay informed, guys.